The Bite Show is listener supported at thebiteshow.com.
Hello, everybody. This is GeorgeAnn Hughes, and this is The Bite Show. And we're really blessed to have Joseph Farrell with us. Joseph Farrell has a website called GizaDeathStar.com. And there is a PayPal button there. Please make use of it. And today, Joseph and I are going to talk about the Middle East. But first, I have asked Joseph to address an issue that a listener emailed to me. That Joseph, did you know that because you were educated at Oxford, that you had to have a sponsor, and that you are an Illuminati because the Illuminati are all involved in Oxford?
I see. Well, oh my gosh! Oh, hi, GeorgeAnn. Jeez.
Hi.
That's a way to start off. When you told me about addressing the Oxford thing, I just thought you meant, well, what was it like to go there? not that I was an Illuminatus. Oh my word.
Yeah.
Oh my word. Well.
And she says, I've been studying these things for 21 years, and I know, and I'm speaking the truth, and just really on a soapbox.
Okay, and her conclusion from that 21 years of study is that I'm an Illuminatus.
Yes.
Okay. Oh
I know, it's pretty hilarious.
Well, from just about any way you slice it. I mean, for crying out loud, if the Illuminati are that desperate to want to recruit a hack from South Dakota, then they've fallen on some pretty hard times. Oh, jeez. Oh, my word. I'm so speechless, I don't know where to start. Oh, my word, GeorgeAnn. Well, Oxford is let me tell everybody how the system worked when I went there, and perhaps what she may be referring to.
Is the Rhodes Scholar?
Yeah, the Rhodes Scholarships, which everybody's familiar with for the University of Oxford, were set up by Cecil Rhodes. And if you read the way he set up his scholarships, the original trust was essentially what he was trying to do was set up a secret society, which he did.
Yes.
And the goal of that society was to re-amalgamate the British Commonwealth and the United States of America, and to control this entity secretly. And he set up the Rhodes Scholarships to basically recruit people, spot and target and spot people and recruit them to do this sort of thing. But you know, the Rhodes Trust, which still maintains those scholarships, has pushed as a result of this, ever since its establishment, has pushed this kind of global socialist agenda under Anglo-American hegemony. So in other words, it was yet another very clever, very subtle, cunning attempt to perpetuate and extend the power and influence of the British Empire.
Yeah.
Now, this really is the principal sort of fraternal organization in the background of the University of Oxford, but there are literally scores of others, GeorgeAnn. I mean, Oxford has a very, very heavy presence of Freemasonry. The major political parties in Great Britain do a lot of recruitment for new political leaders at both Oxford and Cambridge. The Home Office maintains close contact with those two universities And, of course, as a result of that, Scotland Yard and MI5, MI6 do a lot of recruitment and so on and so forth. So it is true that those universities, just like Yale and Princeton and Harvard and so on in this country, that those universities are suffused, quite literally suffused, with a very heavy culture, a very heavy presence of those kinds of institutions and entities. Mm-hmm. It is very, very peculiar, GeorgeAnn, to people in the American system to understand and appreciate the weight, the pressure, the stifling atmosphere that you feel at the University of Oxford. I wrote a little blog about it on my website back in January because I kept getting questions from people.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to explain the phenomenon to anybody from, I don't care what university you're from or how prestigious it is in this country. There is absolutely no comparison to the weight that you feel there and to the standards academically to which you're held. Mm-hmm. There is no comparison. I didn't go over there because I wanted an easy ride.
Yeah. Had
I wanted an easy ride and to pay a lot of money, I would have gone to, an Ivy League university in this country. But,
yeah.
And people will say that I'm being over exaggerating. No, I'm not. I believe, regardless of the institution in this country, it is a fraudulent academic system.
Yes.
I'm not saying that there's not a lot of changes at the University of Oxford since I was there. I've been made aware of a great many of them. They're very disheartening to me. But at least when I was there, it was at the tail end of a very long era that stretched back into the Middle Ages that preserved an academic tradition that is very, very old, very rich, in many cases very beautiful, and in many cases very ugly. There's no getting around it. But it was nevertheless a high, grand academic tradition.
Yes.
Now, that said, when Rhodes set up his scholarships, they were solely and exclusively for undergraduates, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, it is true in those scholarships you do have to have sponsors, but you see, I did not go up to the University of Oxford as an undergraduate. I went up as a graduate, eventually with, probationary status to move to postgraduate level. Mm-hmm. So, right off the bat, she just does not know what she's talking about because at the University of Oxford, the Rhodes scholarships are not extended to graduate and postgraduate level. Now, there are certain foreign scholarships that do apply to students at those levels, but again, I did not go over there on any scholarship. I did not go over there on any sponsorship. That said, at the time that I went up to Oxford, and please understand, when I'm using an expression there that is unique and peculiar to the University of Oxford. You are not admitted to the university, and you do not attend it. Those are American expressions. The British and Oxonian expression to going to that university is quite literally, you go up to it, and you go down from it.
Yes.
That's their expression for it. And those expressions, again, those expressions should convey to you something of the atmosphere of the place.
Yeah.
They were not accidentally chosen. When you're admitted to that place, accepted to go up to it, the heaviness that you feel, GeorgeAnn, is that you are quite literally walking in the buildings and handling the papers of people like Roger Bacon and Christopher Wren and Isaac Newton, and
yes.
It goes on and on and on.
Yes.
And you feel, quite literally, you feel their presence in the air. You either survive the place or you don't. That's about the only way to put it. Now, in that atmosphere, when I decided to go there to do my PhD, to be allowed to do that. You do have to have a mentor who will recommend you to the university and will accept you as one of his or her students.
Mm-hmm.
And this is pretty much true of all levels at the university. At least, again, when I went there, no one went up to Oxford, even at the undergraduate level, without some sort of first initial contact between the member of the faculty or members of the faculty in the subject area that you wanted to read it for a degree in. In other words, you didn't get accepted by filling out little ovals with a number 2 lead pencil and shipping it off to Princeton University to spit out a number.
Yeah.
Like they do in this country. They are not interested, or at least back then, they were not interested in that sort of nonsense at that university. Most people there at that university were at some point interviewed personally in order to get in. And that is particularly true at the graduate and even more so at the postgraduate level. So yes, in my case, I was interviewed by the man that I wanted to study with. He accepted me as one of his 2 students that he accepts every year as candidates for a PhD, and that was that. So, yeah, but, in all honesty, GeorgeAnn, I have never been even remotely attracted to any sort of association with secret societies or fraternal organizations. To me, that would be the height of stupidity. It took me 20 years to free myself from the deleterious effects and associations of religion. And to me, it would be just almost spiritually nauseating to be associated, to jump out of the frying pan right back into the fire of another system of associations that expect you to do this, expect you to do that,
Yeah.
The very last thing that I can imagine doing is joining any of those types of organizations. I have been approached by them and strongly suggested or hinted that, why don't you ask us to join us?
Yeah.
Yes, that has happened, and I have refused in each and every instance because, again, there's nothing I could learn from them other than a bunch of, in my opinion, rather silly rituals.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really that I'm inclined, that I know that I'm particularly inclined to share with them. So, like I said when you asked me that, I'm just thrown for a loop. If the Illuminati are that hard up that they have to recruit a hack from South Dakota, then they've fallen on some pretty hard times.
No. Well, I wanted to clear that up because it was so ridiculous.
Well, I appreciate your doing that, GeorgeAnn. I didn't know really what you were talking about. I get asked questions about the university, what it's like over there, and I thought that's kind of what you meant. But for the atmosphere, again, I posted a blog on my website, but that kind of thinking is disturbing to me.
And she's a good Christian.
Well, I was about to say,
Yeah.
it sounds to me like this is coming out of yet another one of those. For one of the, I'm not going to pull any punches here with my words. It sounds to me like another one of those nutty American fundamentalisms. One of these homegrown things where you have to have someone to hate.
Yeah.
I mean, this seems to me to be the hallmark of all of those systems, is they have to have somebody to hate if someone deviates from outside their little narrow way of thinking or their little box, and ipso facto that makes them, a servant of the devil, a member of the Illuminati, whatever bugaboo they want to cast at you.
Yeah.
It's particularly dangerous because it's a very short step from putting people in those kinds of boxes for those kinds of reasons without knowing them personally, and then being able to justify doing all sorts of horrible things in the name of your system. And that's that is also, again, why I would never even consider any association with a fraternity or any group like that either.
Well, now that
putting on the brakes and changing gears.
Yes. Now that we've got that out of the way, Germany has come out with a news article that they believe that Osama bin Laden should have been put on trial.
Well, yeah, GeorgeAnn, this whole...
No trial, no justice.
Yeah, this whole thing disturbs me profoundly. From any number of aspects. And you know, what is interesting to me is that when the president made his speech, he looked to me to be a man under extraordinary pressure. He looked to me actually nervous and scared. And the reason I say that is that President Obama is one of the more eloquent presidents. In other words, he has a gift for public speaking that we really haven't seen since Ronald Reagan and, President Kennedy. So that, the first thing that struck me when I saw his speech was that he looked distinctively uncomfortable under pressure and very, very nervous. He almost looked to a certain extent to me to be frightened. But what was really interesting to me is that as he was talking, I was kind of online surfing around and looking for responses to it. And what really struck me is that the story that we were given was being picked apart as it was emerging. People jumped on this really fast.
Yes.
And one of the things that I agree with whoever published this article in Germany is that, okay, if we're in a war on terror, we either treat people as combatants, or if we are in a police action, we bring them to justice. What disturbs me is that in the case of Osama bin Laden, the official story that was pushed on 9/11 was that this man had something to do with it, that he was therefore responsible for the death of thousands of innocent people. And let's face it, he is. He's caused harm to Muslims. He's caused harm to other people. This was not a nice man.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to know the truth, but to have established that in a court of law,
yes,
in a process that will adjudicate the matter, that's a different matter.
Yes.
What disturbs me is that bin Laden was someone who had some degree, some level of inside knowledge of 9/11 and most likely other operations that he was involved with, and some dating back to his time as an asset for American intelligence in Afghanistan during the Soviet invasion. So I suspect that the real motivation here was not to bring him to trial, but rather precisely to avoid having to do so.
Yes, and that is assuming that this whole thing is true.
Well, yes, that's my other problem with this. The story that we were given, as you know, was beginning to be picked apart almost as soon as it appeared.
Yes.
There were little minor discrepancies, and they're still going on and on about this on the news, trying to
plug
the holes and plug the holes and make it come out a plausible story. For what reason, I do not know. I'll be very blunt and honest, GeorgeAnn. We're doing this as kind of a commentary or extended section on our social engineering series.
Yes.
And what strikes me here is that we may be looking at a story that, and please understand the words may, okay?
Yeah.
Because, you and I are speculating off the top of our heads as we proceed here. So everybody, please understand this is speculation. It strikes me, GeorgeAnn, that the official story that we were given last Sunday, then the problems that immediately began to surface with it, are of such a nature that we might be looking at one complex social engineering operation. Because the effect of the story and the effect of those who have begun to question it is to create yet another layer of doubt and confusion and cynicism toward the United States government and in particular toward the executive branch. And I'm like many Americans, I am very cynical about our federal government.
Yes.
But yet at the same time, my response to this story is very, very ambivalent, because it does feel like the whole thing is designed to a certain extent to cast doubt, to sow suspicion, to raise the amount of confusion and cynicism toward the federal government that somebody wants to be there. And again, I go back to my impression of President Obama as he was giving that speech. He seemed to me to be a distinctively nervous man.
Yes.
He was not speaking with his normal ease or facility when he was talking. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of President Obama or his politics, but give the man credit where credit is due. He's a fairly intelligent man, and he's a fairly good public speaker. And I did not see any of that.
Yeah.
That's what disturbs me. I did not see any of that in that speech on Sunday night. He seemed wooden, he seemed stiff, he seemed unnatural in a deep sort of way. That's just my personal impression. This Obama thing, this Osama bin Laden thing bothers me for yet another reason, and it's not just the trial, and that is that they disposed of the body very quickly.
Yeah.
And this bothers me, GeorgeAnn, for yet another reason, and I wrote a blog about this on my website. If we look back at the social engineering schemes that America has been subjected to since really the Kennedy assassination, you can think of big ones, Ruby Ridge, Waco, the Oklahoma City bombing, all of these horrible, hideous acts have been accompanied by increases in the power of the government to intrude on the private lives of its citizens.
Yes.
And in each of those cases, at Waco, what did we see? Well, after that debacle, we saw the destruction of the compound, and quite literally the destruction of forensic evidence that might have led to drawing a picture and conclusions that were at variance with the official story.
Yes.
In the case of the Oklahoma City bombing, the same thing occurred. They moved very quickly to destroy the building itself, and cart off all the evidence and bury it somewhere.
Yeah.
And again, when that disaster occurred, my reaction was immediately, just based on principles of physics, that there was no way that a fertilizer bomb did that sort of damage to that sort of building.
Yeah.
All right. So again, it was destruction of evidence, it seemed to me, to prevent the possibility of establishing or overturning the official story that we were given. And again, at 9/11, the same thing happened. You had the quick, swift packing up and carting away of the evidence that remained from that tragedy. And again, that has left everybody to reconstruct the scenario as best as they can without the forensic evidence. Well, here again, with Osama bin Laden, we are dealing with destruction of evidence, and we are left either to accept in toto the official story or to question it. And of course, given the context of the official story, to question it implicitly brands you with the idea that, well, you're unpatriotic somehow, or so on and so forth. And that's a very dangerous precedent to me.
Oh, yes.
I don't consider myself unpatriotic at all. I don't think it is wrong, given the principles upon which this country was founded, to question any official story put out by any level of government, from the federal to your local village or city council. So, that aspect of it also bothers me. It bothers me immensely that the media, at least at the beginning, was driving this guerrilla mob-like frenzy of chanting USA, 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 and not sitting back to question the story that we were being told.
Yeah.
I think that's again part of the social engineering implications or possibilities of all of this.
Well, they have since been going to release video that have never been seen before, video of the inside of his house, what he had in his medicine cabinet. They could say this about anything.
Yes.
And to go into someone's country and conduct an operation like this.
Yes.
They said that the ISI?
The Pakistani intelligence?
Yes. That how could this man be living there who is 6'7"?
No.
And nobody know it?
Well, I mean, it is possible, but it's unlikely. The ISI is a fairly efficient intelligence organization, and when I heard this story, that was one of my first thoughts. Was how in the name of sense did Pakistani intelligence fall down on that one? The implication being, of course, that it didn't fall down, that somebody within the ISI knew about it and was protecting a secret. Essentially, it had been bought off. But the wider implication here, GeorgeAnn, is again, to me, falling right in line with the social engineering aspect of all of this, because it is the reaction of people who do question now to be cynical about stories such as this. So that even if the government did have relatively corroborating proof, it will no longer be seen as such. In other words, the government is in a real bind. It has so manipulated and lied to the American people for so long about just about every little thing that you can think of, that even if it were to come out with something relatively corroborative, the general atmosphere is it's not going to be believed. And when you reach a state, I don't care what your powers of control over a population are, when you reach the state where the population is no longer with you, eventually that government collapses.
And that may be what they want.
That may be what they want. Who knows? This is precisely my point. This is why the social engineering perspective on all of this disturbs me profoundly. we need only look at Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union as to what happened when the world's most powerful totalitarian state with enormous technological resources utterly lost its influence over the popular culture and people. Mm-hmm. Those governments simply collapsed.
Yeah.
And this is a danger point. Fortunately, Russia struggled through that and came out to their credit with a relatively stable government and a government that was looking and appears to be looking out for the Russian people's national interest. That's not to say it doesn't suffer from, the normal corruptions of any government. It does. Mm-hmm. But it at least went through a massive transition and is emerging relatively in good shape. And in shape that's not willing to kowtow to every little wish coming out of the bankster crowd from London and New York. Our government, on the other hand, to me, GeorgeAnn, is so under the thumb of those people.
Oh, yes.
And it is so increasingly clear to an increasing number of people in this country and around the world that this government is no longer responsive to anyone but those people that have it under its thumb. That this is a very, very, very dangerous situation. As I said, the social engineering aspects of this go very deep, and they disturb me profoundly. This Bin Laden situation is being spun in so many ways that disturb me a great deal, not the least of which is immediately when the story broke, they started the idea that, brace yourself for retaliation. Well, again, retaliation can be staged.
Yes.
To whip up more enthusiasm to go get those nasty bad Muslims. Well, if you're watching television, those nasty bad Muslims have pretty well had it with their governments too. So it's really a situation, GeorgeAnn. I think that we're looking at acts of desperation.
Speaking of Muslims, Syria.
Mm-hmm.
From their government, they've opened fire on women's groups that
I believe it.
That are marching.
I believe it.
I mean, what a bunch of cowardly lowlifes. Oh.
Cowardly, and this is something that's very interesting to comment on, because Muslim scholars, we in the West have, particularly in this country, have been fed such a line of BS, pardon my French, but that's what it is. We've been fed such a line of BS about the Islamic world.
Yes.
There are many, many Muslim scholars that realize that one of the principal problems of their culture is that Islam as a religion, as a religious system, never went through a process similar to the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. In other words, it has not gone through a modernization of the ethical and moral implications of its principal tenets. All right? And there have been Muslim scholars calling for precisely such a thing. And one of the things that they point often to is to the place of women within traditional Islamic culture.
Yes.
And the things that you see going on in the Middle East, I think, are precisely the beginnings of a social movement to bring about some of these reforms that have been centuries overdue.
Oh, yeah.
Centuries overdue. The only reason that Islam has not reformed itself, in my opinion, is because of the interference of the Western powers and the oil companies to begin with. It's much easier to control a region and control a population if you have in place an ideological system that more or less keeps the population repressed.
Well, in Saudi Arabia, it's the Wahhabi.
Yes, I know. Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
It's much easier to control populations if you already have in place an ideology that permits you to do that, if you can simply buy off the leaders of it. All right?
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent, some of what's going on in the Middle East does appear to me to be contrived. It does appear to me to be orchestrated. But by the same token, there is a genuineness to it. There is a genuine feel to it that this is also not just orchestrated, it is also spontaneous.
Yes.
That these people have had it, and you cannot blame them one little bit if you know anything of the history of the region. So,
well, Joseph, in Bahrain, Syria, they're taking doctors out of the hospital into a prison setting and torturing them.
Well, you know,
and
again,
nurses.
Again, we have to be very careful about what we hear and see and read on the Internet. I'm not doubting that any of that's going on. What I'm trying to get at is that what we're looking at now, I think, is certain moves on the part of the West, again, appear to me to be moves of desperation on the part of an elite that senses it might be losing its grip, might be losing its ability to control that region of the world and the resources in it.
Yes.
This has been the linchpin and guiding principle of Anglo-American foreign policy since the 19th century. So this sudden outburst that we have in the Middle East, from their point of view, has to be channeled. They have to get their influence re-extended over this movement, and it has to be channeled into what they would call appropriate directions soon, or they've lost their grip.
Oh.
So, in other words, you can expect to see their puppet regimes reacting with a great deal of
tenacity
and brutalism, brutality and terrorism and so on and so forth. That's just going to be what happens. I don't think they're going to get away with it. I think, you know, you and I have talked many times in these various series that I think the Anglo-American corporate power elite is on a major defensive mode. Their nice, tidy world is unraveling, and there's some severe factional infighting going on in the so-called New World Order crowd. And that's my point of view. And I realize that there's a great deal to be said for the other viewpoint that no, this is all proceeding according to plan. These people are just extremely clever. But my reading has always been that things really began to start to unravel with their New World Order plan at 9/11.
My goodness. Well, you know my feelings. I hate to see people just shot down.
Well,
in the
of
streets.
course, you know, no person who is in contact with their genuine humanity, no person of conscience or heart or rationality can look at those sorts of things and not feel profound empathy and sadness. No one that is a normal human being can do that. You know, Thomas Merton's expression, "No man is an island."
Yes.
When one man's rich, so are we all. The suffering that is taking place moves the bulk of normal, rational humanity. I think it's only at the very pinnacle of power, where you are dealing with people who are so absolutely corrupt and whose sole motivation is to extend their own security and power, I think it's only there that you're going to find the lack of normal feelings of compassion.
Yeah, when I think of people going into the hospital, having been shot down in the street, and the doctors are fearful to treat the people because, the security forces are watching, and they take the doctors off. They take them in, and another tactic. The security forces go out and around the city, knock on doors, and ask, "Is your son here?" And if the mother cannot produce the son, they take the mother into custody, into prison.
Well, I mean, this is standard. I'm not trying to belittle this or anything. I'm just pointing out this is standard operating procedure in these types of situations. I mean, these, governments when they are under assault, governments when they are under the threat of losing their power, always react this way. They always become paranoid, irrational, and bent to preserve their power at all costs.
Very violent.
And that's when they become dangerous. When the situation becomes dangerous for them, they become dangerous to the situation.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising. But if we step back and look at the big picture, the world is changing.
Yes,
in a massive way.
Yes.
And a lot of it, GeorgeAnn, I think exceeds the abilities of these elites that have thought that they've run things for so long.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is exceeding their ability. Their models of action and reaction to some extent have broken down. So they themselves are, in my opinion, again, a bit confused as to how to handle things.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there is so much confusion. Their models have broken down. They don't know what to do. And I do think that there is some sort of big consciousness awakening taking place that goes far beyond social engineering. I think that there is.
Yes.
I don't know how else to put it other than consciousness awakening. I think you're seeing a very unusual phenomenon. You're seeing good people getting better and bad people getting worse. And the interesting thing about this transitional period, GeorgeAnn, is that it is precisely those people who think that they're doing good by clinging to their system that are doing the most harm.
Yes. Yes.
When you get to the point, let's go back to this lady that wrote you that claimed I'm some sort of Illuminatist member of, whatever.
Yeah.
When you get to the point that you can say that about somebody that you don't even know.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows me personally will tell you, would react with laughter at the very notion that I would even be interested in being a part of something like that.
Yeah.
I do not want power. I do not want fame. I don't even want wealth. What motivates me in my life is love. And anyone who knows me would react, with the idea that that's just silly.
Yeah.
When you get to the point that you start making claims like that about people just because they don't fit into your system,
yeah.
then you're in a very, very sad state.
Yes.
Because that system is not, I guarantee you, that system is not going to survive.
True. Oh, Joseph.
That's the whole point of this transition.
Yes.
Just about every system that we can think of, the grand systems of the 18th and 19th and 20th centuries, from the Enlightenment to communism to socialism to laissez-faire capitalism to all the various fundamentalisms that those centuries spawned, every one of those systems has failed.
Yes.
And nowhere more egregiously than in the fundamentalisms that have been for the last century, predicting this date and that date for the end of the world, and excoriating this person and that person for being unrighteous or whatever, for simply falling outside of their system.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like the old Soviet Union did, if you didn't accept communism, then you were considered irrational and in need of psychological help. So what did they do? They packed you off to an institution and essentially tortured you in the name of psychology to make you accept the system.
Yeah.
So, it's that mentality more than anything else right now going on in this world that scares the daylights out of me.
Oh, boy. Well,
People that cannot think outside of their book. Oscar Wilde had a wonderful expression, a statement, and I think the statement was born out of his experience at the University of Oxford. He said that the man who does not think for himself does not think at all.
Yeah.
And, that to me is the mark of a mature individual, is the willingness to think for yourself and even do so in ways that may threaten whatever system you hold.
Well, very few people have first of all, the intellect, secondly, the desire to truly think for themselves.
Well, I must disagree with you there a bit. I'm one of those that believes that every human being has a mind. That one of the long-term goals of the people that have been trying to socially engineer this country is to convince the vast majority of the population that they're stupid and not capable of learning complex things. Well, my experience in education was always quite the opposite, that most people are very intelligent if given the opportunity and given the motivation to exercise it. I really think that you put your nail right on the head with the second statement that you made, the desire.
Yeah. What
most people lack is not the intelligence. What most people lack is the desire. This true intelligence is not just a rational thing. It's also an emotional thing. Intelligence comes out of the motivation to seek truth that is personally satisfying, that allows one to rationalize one's personal experience and place in the world. And if everybody were doing that, then I think you would also have you'd have an awakening of the realization that you have to be tolerant of those who come to different conclusions than you do.
Yes.
If you genuinely believe in truth, you have to believe in the notion that you may not know it.
Yeah, that's true.
And if that's the case, then you have to take and hold your positions, according to the old expression, with a light hand.
Yes.
And be tolerant of those that hold different ones. The adherent of a system, on the other hand, is always looking for converts to it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're not looking for converts to it, they're looking for enemies of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, that's part of the social engineering of systems of thought, is that this is an inbuilt programming to them.
Well, Joseph, there's people that say, well, if it's not in the Bible, it's not true.
Well, this.
And that just sets my teeth on edge.
Well, it sets my teeth on edge too, because for one thing, it's a theological absurdity.
Yes.
There was. Let me give you an example here as to why that's so. There was a very famous evangelical theologian by the name of Francis Schaeffer that was very popular in the 70s and 80s. He's now deceased, but he wrote a number of sort of popular Christian apologetical works.
Yes.
From a Calvinistic sort of Reformed Protestant tradition. And one of the things that he was constantly having to remind the evangelical community is, if you believe in the tenets of that strand of Protestantism, then you have to say that the Bible has true truth, but not exhaustive truth.
Uh-huh.
Which was a very interesting statement
Yes,
for a man in his position to make.
Yes.
And again, you know, I know the mentality that you're talking about. It sets my teeth on edge too. It's another case of people letting a book do their thinking for them, or even better put, a system of interpreting that book do their thinking for them, rather than thinking for themselves. And again, we go back to the nature of those kinds of systems. When you're not looking, you know, as part of the programming of those systems, in that when you're not looking for converts to them, you're looking for enemies of it.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
You are locked into a mode of an attitude and an emotional attitude toward your fellow human being that, if you stop and examine it, doesn't really come out of any moral tenet to begin with.
Yes.
Because you cannot genuinely, in my opinion, exercise love in that kind of system. Because everything you're doing is motivated by one of those two things.
Well, Joseph, by golly, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me back, GeorgeAnn.
Yes.
I hope my I hope my commentary in response to your Middle East questions was cogent.
Yes.
And if they weren't, I write it off to the fluidity of the situation and the ever-shifting story that we're being given.
Well, it is ever-shifting.
Yeah.
They're just nitpicking at every little thing.
Yes.
To make it be true.
Yeah. Exactly. And again, it's the erection of the system.
Yeah.
It's the construction of a system of interpretation, and when you get into that model of thinking, then you have to fit the facts to your theory, you know.
Yeah.
So, social engineering continues apace.
Yes. Yes. Well, Joseph, thank you very much.
Thank you, GeorgeAnn.
Well, and everybody, go to GizaDeathStar.com. Work on that PayPal button there. Keep Joseph in research material. And
thank you, GeorgeAnn. I appreciate that.
Yes. Well, it's very much needed. And you can also go to the Bite Show, go to the audio library, click on Joseph's name, and his page will open up with links to all of the audio files that we have done. And they're all free.
And help GeorgeAnn out with some donations, folks, please.
Thank you, Joseph.
Well, you're welcome. I know that these shows are expensive, and that the amount of downloads versus the amount of support is, quite frankly, to me, appalling. But it's not easy being in this community and doing this type of show or research. It's really a vocation rather than It's a vocation rather than a living.
Yeah, you can say that again.
Yeah.
Oh, well, everybody, God bless you for listening. This is GeorgeAnn Hughes with Joseph Farrell signing off tonight. I believe this is Magic of Social Engineering.